Mock Draft Monday. We're back yet again. Another Monday, another mock draft. I hope you guys do enjoy the content. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you do. Those are the two most important things you can do to help support the channel. And as per usual, the draft order here is based on the standings as of Saturday, April 5th. Now, last mock draft, we did do a lottery simulation. Of course, the lottery will be coming up here rather shortly, so that'll be something to keep your eyes on here on the channel. We're going to talk about that, have some videos covering the NBA Draft Lottery coming out very, very soon. And then I want you also to comment your prediction for the national championship. Houston, the Cougars, with a huge upset over Duke. Very surprising game to me, especially with how it ended. We'll talk about that in today's video a bit as well. Versus the Florida Gators, who do have a few players in this mock draft as well. So there's going to be a lot to cover, obviously, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts. I'm going to be leaving those little YouTube hearts on every single one of your predictions about the Houston versus Florida National Championship in this Mock Draft Monday National Championship Edition video. And first overall, we do have the Utah Jazz, and Jazz fans probably on top of the mountains there in Utah, sitting there screaming their lungs out saying, finally, we have the first overall pick in a utility sports mock draft. All year long, somehow I have accidentally avoided giving the Jazz the first overall pick by accident, whether they actually had the worst record and then I decided we're going to do a lottery simulation because you guys requested that, or you guys had the second, third, fourth worst record in the league for a while this year. So unlucky up to this point, but for a team that's never had the first overall pick in the NBA draft in their franchise history, are the Jazz due for the first overall pick? And boy, what a year it would be for them to have that first overall selection. No surprises here. First overall, I have the Utah Jazz selecting forward/guard Cooper Flagg out of Duke. And obviously, yes, his freshman season, his Duke career has come to a close in somewhat disappointing fashion. Left a shot short, one that realistically, we've seen him make this year multiple times over and over again. And I think when it comes to his freshman season, AP Player of the Year, he was tremendous all year long on both ends of the floor. One of the best two-way prospects we've seen in the last 10, 15 years or so now. I'm still very high historically on guys like Wembanyama, who I would have head and shoulders, both figuratively and literally, above Cooper Flagg. But then also someone like Cade Cunningham, who maybe didn't have the team success at Oklahoma State that Cooper Flagg did. I still think as an individual prospect held a ton of weight and upside for me long term. I was extremely high on Luka Doncic in his draft class, of course. That was before I was doing YouTube here for Utility Sports. But nonetheless, with all that said, Cooper Flagg is one of those prospects that years from now, years and years and years down the road, I'm going to recount and talk about how good of a prospect he was because of what he can do on both ends of the floor. We've really seen him stretch his game in the last 3 or 4 years from where he was, really from the first time I started watching him when he was an 8th, 9th grade kid. When I was watching him play basketball back then, he kind of ideally viewed him as a play finisher and someone who was going to be a defensive prospect. And that's where the evolution of his game has really brought us as a creator of offense, an offensive engine, initiator. Now, I do think he still has work to do on that end of the floor, specifically with his handle out on the perimeter. I still continue to point to that as the one thing that I am a little concerned about if he's going to be a reliable, true 1A championship caliber player. It's going to need to rely on better ball handling skills and the ability to beat his guy off the bounce throughout the NCAA tournament. He did struggle a bit finishing at the rim, and I do think that was a byproduct of not being able to shift his on-ball defender and set himself up for success by beating his man cleanly off the dribble from the perimeter. Now, I do think still with his overall playmaking feel, which we saw a ton this year in lobs to Khaman Maluach, and kickouts to Kon Knueppel as some examples of that, other draft prospects you'll see in this mock draft. We also saw him be able to exercise his size to his advantage by finishing in the mid-range area over the top of guys. Now, couldn't get that shot to go against Houston, unfortunately, toward the end of that game. But throughout the year, we saw him become a skilled scorer, had 15, 20-plus point games before his ultimate game in college basketball. And transitioning to the NBA, it's going to be, I think, relatively smooth for him. He's played with NBA caliber players. He's played with a variety of different archetypes. You think about an off-ball guard like Tyrese Proctor. You think about movement wings like Kon Knueppel. You think about a true lob threat, rim running, rim-to-rim type of big man in Khaman Maluach. And I think in Utah here, specifically focus on the Jazz, who finally have that first overall pick in this mock draft. They do have some interesting pieces for Cooper Flagg to work with. They have one of the best play finishers in their finished big man, Lauri Markkanen. They also, you look at a rim-to-rim big like Walker Kessler, someone who obviously the Jazz have had shooting some threes this year. But when he's really at the best of his abilities, he's finishing at the rim. He can be a high field goal percentage player like Khaman Maluach was this year for the Duke Blue Devils. And Cooper Flagg's shown the ability to weaponize that. They also have someone who has really been racking up assists this year in Isaiah Collier. Now, the true shooting percentage is still extremely ugly. He's shooting about 24% on threes this year. So I'm not going to hold too much stock into an Isaiah Collier type player. But what we did see from Cooper Flagg is playing off the ball a bit too as a screen and roll guy, working out of the short roll, which I think can be very, very good in Utah here. There's enough pieces already there for the Jazz that they have some of those kind of existing core nucleus pieces that they could fit around Cooper Flagg while still being somewhat of a blank canvas because they have long-term avenues to improve their team by trading draft picks. Obviously, maybe at some point trying to find ways to use cap space to sign a player. Now, Jazz fans are going to say, we never do that. Historically correct, but now if you're going to have Cooper Flagg, that will change things for you. You'll become a market, just like how De'Aaron Fox was interested in going to San Antonio to play with the Spurs. Teams and players will be wanting to work with Utah to get their, agents will want to get their player there to set them up for winning and getting paid down the road. And Cooper Flagg is a winning player, someone who I think will put Utah on the map once again in a very, very big way. Pick number 2, the Washington Wizards now. A team that I do think, if they land Cooper Flagg, will be really, really fun to watch moving forward. But second overall, even though they did last year draft Bub Carrington, they also, of course, grabbed Keyshawn George later in that same first round. Really at the heart of this team is upside. And you look at Alex Sarr, someone who is going to be in the Rookie of the Year race down the stretch of the season here. This year, the Wizards have struggled, but I think there's a lot of optimism going forward about this team, and I definitely understand why. Bub Carrington's had some real huge performances. This team has some draft capital loaded up from both the Bradley Beal trade, which is one of the biggest trade wins in recent NBA history, getting off of that contract, setting themselves up to be this bad, to put themselves toward the top of NBA drafts for the next couple of years. And second overall, they're not getting a perfect prospect. They're not getting a true 1A type of upside player, in my opinion, like Cooper Flagg. But what they are getting here second overall is someone who they can put the ball in his hands and let him be a primary initiator of offense. And that player second overall is, unsurprisingly, Dylan Harper, the New Jersey kid here with Rutgers. Stays in the Metro Atlantic and ends up playing with the Washington Wizards in this mock draft. I think specifically for Dylan Harper, something I've harped on in the past is his ability to split in the pick and roll. I've also in previous mock drafts talked about the value of drafting players whose dads played in the NBA. And you think about Ron Harper Sr., he had a ton of success in the NBA. Was a really great player, of course, won multiple championships with the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. You have that NBA pedigree there. You know that the athletic tools, physical traits are going to be there. Now, does Harper have, super S-tier type of athleticism? No. But I think he's got very functional athleticism. He's got great coordination skills. He's very balanced as a ball handler, and he understands how to take and absorb space when it's presented to him, specifically out of the pick and roll. And I think for Washington here specifically, the Wizards are going to have types of players that Dylan Harper hasn't really played with a ton in the past. Think about the value of a pick and pop big like Alex Sarr, what he could be long-term. Progression-wise, if he continues to grow and blossom, his rookie numbers look very, very comparable to Kristaps Porzingis. I tweeted that out about a week ago now. If you guys want to go follow on Twitter, links in the description for that. Dylan Harper, to me, is a player who I just think stands out in a really big way because of his ability to comfortably handle the ball with solid positional size. He's, I think, a very underrated playmaker at this point in time. Rutgers, the Scarlet Knights just flat out did not have the types of players around him to really weaponize his playmaking. and Ace Bailey did not have an elite freshman season by any stretch of imagination, but I do think Washington, a team that is still kind of, a blank canvas in their own right, is building up their direction moving forward, and Dylan Harper is a player who can definitely be a build-around block for them into the near future. Pick number 3, the Charlotte Hornets, now on the clock, and I think for Charlotte specifically, there's a lot that yet has to play into this. Last week we talked about them maybe drafting a center, someone like Khaman Maluach, who had a really great freshman season in a lot of different ways, but I also do think there would be a significant difference going from Duke to Charlotte. Obviously, you're taking the scale up from college basketball to the NBA, but you're also looking at the type of defense that Duke was able to build as a team defense, the point of attack defense that they had, the ability to kind of crowd ball handlers and make them uncomfortable. And then Maluach could be your weak side rim protector. If he goes to Charlotte, that's not quite as simple. So I think before you worry about rim protection, you have to have some form of ball contain. That's what we're going to address here. Third overall, I have the Charlotte Hornets selecting guard/wing VJ Edgecombe out of Baylor. And I think this is a very intriguing long-term two-way prospect, someone who has been completely blessed with physical tools and gifts that other prospects in this year's class do not possess at all. He's one of the quickest twitch athletes we have in this entire draft class. I always have to harp on that in every single one of these mock drafts because that is what separates him. He has a ton of functional tools that show up on film. It's not just that, hey, at the combine, he's going to jump out of the gym and post a 40-plus inch vertical. It's the fact that you see that vertical on display, whether it's attacking downhill as a rim finisher or on the defensive end of the floor, which is what I'm really focused on with this pick, third overall for Charlotte, giving them someone who can be a downhill threat, but then specifically defensively can stay in front of other on-ball guards, can stay in front of guys, mirror their movements and really present himself to be a 1A type of defender in the NBA. Now, size concerns, you think about facing Boston, for example, you think about facing some of the best East teams, they do have bigger forwards, they have bigger players that are going to commend the ball and control the ball. VJ Edgecombe is probably not best suited to guard 1 through 4 in lineups, right? But I think if you're looking at him kind of as this super athletic 1 through 3 defender who in certain matchups, if you don't have him guarding the best player, can he be a super useful team defender off the ball as a gap helper or a low man where he can actually pick up big men because he's just so athletic and quick that he can take up space and get there before other defenders on your team naturally would? The answer to that is yes, and we've seen it on film all year long for Baylor. Scott Drew didn't utilize him fully offensively as much as I think he could have been used, but he still did average 15 points a game, over 3 assists per game. The assist to turnover rate was actually pretty strong with 1.68 assists to turnovers. And when it comes to the actual functional defensive usage, did post over 2 steals a game with a 3.8% steal percentage. So the steal rate's there. The film, the tape that I've watched all year long has really backed that up as well. And I'm really excited about this pick for Charlotte, who still needs to continue improving their defense and building something around LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. Pick 4, the New Orleans Pelicans here now on the clock at this spot in the draft with now Flagg, Harper, and Edgecombe gone. The Pelicans can look at upside, especially after trading away Brandon Ingram. Are they going to look for a sky's the limit type of potential pick here? Or do they look to build maybe into the point guard spot? Kasparas, Jakucionis could be a guy here that you look at, and this may be a little bit early for some people with where the range is kind of projected right now for Jakucionis. But given the injury that DeJounte Murray sustained this past year, do the Pelicans think that point guard of the future is a big-time need? That's going to be a huge question. But 4th overall, I have the New Orleans Pelicans here selecting wing Ace Bailey out of Rutgers. And I think one thing specifically here, given the market size, given the injury concerns long-term that Zion Williamson has been really, limited by, the fan interest, I think, is going to be one thing that is a long-term concern for the New Orleans ownership specifically, and I think that will send kind of shockwaves down into the front office about how do we need to build this team and what kind of name can we get in the building that will generate fan interest as a high upside, hey, come watch this guy play as he's a rookie youngster and watch him develop in front of your very own eyes. And Ace Bailey, someone who can have that kind of draw. Think about the Pelicans as an organization, a team that's never paid the luxury tax. They are a team that is typically going to be very, very hesitant about spending big money, and they have not made multiple deep playoff runs in the last 15, 20 years. We just haven't seen this team really be a legitimate NBA contender or NBA threat to other teams. So with that in mind, like they're looking to put people in seats, and Ace Bailey is someone who has those physical tools and gives. He has the shot making that is very pleasing to watch, specifically when you think about his shot making talent. Now, when it comes to the actual success rate of that, the true shooting percentage was rather poor this season, given what his actual shot making upside presents itself to be. And I also think there are a lot of other deficiencies, but when it comes to and those deficiencies, for example, kind of go into his play strength. And does he get skinny when he's double teamed? And does he get skinny when he's met and cut off in KBIF defenders, you guys who keep the ball in front of their chest very well? The answer to that is yes. So Ace Bailey, even though there is a lot of upside with that shot making, the size, the physical tools, he does rebound the ball very, very well for his size. And he is active on defense when he isn't stuck ball watching. There's a lot to like long-term about Ace Bailey, and if you get the right coaching staff and you get the right kind of camaraderie and guys around him to help him through his development, this can be a very good player in the NBA. But it's a long road, one that I'm not certainly comfortable in betting, especially for a franchise like New Orleans, who has had a host of problems, whether it's the training staff or getting guys to stick around like Anthony Davis. There have been problems in New Orleans for a while. I'm not sure this is the best landing spot really for Ace Bailey, but this is the kind of franchise that I could definitely see betting on that upside, 4th overall for them moving forward. Pelicans fans, I'm sorry, that probably sounded like a little mini rant hating on you guys. I'm hoping for the best for New Orleans. I really am. The more teams that are competitive and good in the NBA, the better. And I'm hoping for New Orleans that this pick becomes an absolute home run selection. Pick number 5, the Philadelphia tanking 76ers here now. Of course, with their big three, Paul George, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey all out for the season, it looks like a foregone conclusion that the 76ers, unless the lottery gods are against them, will very likely keep this selection that was owed top 6 protected to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So 5th overall, I have the 76ers here selecting wing Trey Johnson. I think through the top 10, this was the hardest pick for me to nail down because there's a variety of ways you could look at how this team should go about team building. One inherent flaw that this roster has really struggled with in the last 7-8 years or so is that when Joel Embiid is not on the floor, they are terrible, and that oftentimes draws scrutiny to the center position. But if you go back a few years ago, they paid a pretty penny to sign Al Horford in free agency. The fit just was a little clunky, surprisingly did not work out very well despite how good of a player Al Horford has been throughout pretty much his entire NBA career. And then they ended up salary dumping him to Oklahoma City, which funny enough is why this pick is top 6 protected to Oklahoma City. So I went back and forth. Do I mock them a big man? Derik, Queen, Khaman, Maluach. Could that be in play? I decided against it, and I went with Trey Johnson because very, very obviously this kid can shoot the basketball, and he can shoot it very, very good from behind the three-point line. You think about Jared McCain, how electric he was when he was on the floor early this year for Philadelphia. Obviously, injuries really derailed his rookie season, but the 76ers, a team that if they're hoping to be healthy next year, hopefully Maxey can be healthy all season. Paul George obviously hoping to kind of regression to the mean we've seen from years in the past from him. And then Joel Embiid, when he is on the floor, he is still one of the best players. That was not really necessarily the truth this year. Very diminished results and returns from Joel Embiid's season this year with Philadelphia when he was actually on the court. But you have to think going forward that the Sixers, if healthy, can still be a legitimate contending team. If they don't feel that way, they need to trade Joel Embiid. They need to try and trade Paul George and see if they can get off both of those guys in one deal. Either way, Trey Johnson, someone whose skill set can fit in long-term as a wing shooter, someone who could be really dynamic next to Jared McCain. You think about the twirl screens that they could set. There's a lot of fun stuff. If you go back and watch some of the 2013, 2012 Warriors with Mark Jackson, some of the sets that they were running with those two being screeners for each other, there's a lot of fun stuff they could do with McCain and Trey Johnson together on the floor, which is ultimately why I did mock Trey Johnson here. I just think from his skill set as a movement shooter and a pull-up shooter, there's a lot of unique and fun things that they could do. Can handle the ball a bit for them. Playmaking is so-so. It's not going to be his biggest strength. It's also not going to be this huge inherent flaw that kills his NBA career by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm a big believer in Trey Johnson. I think he can have a very successful career, and with the importance and the value of three-point shooting in today's game, the 76ers make a very safe bet on a player who can really shoot the lights out of the basketball. Pick number 6, the Brooklyn Nets here now. And again, we're back to the big man question. Now, they do have some bigs there in Day'Ron Sharpe and Nick Claxton, who I do like quite a bit. Noah Clowney as well is another interesting one. So I think for the Brooklyn Nets specifically, if you're looking at what this team is trying to be long-term, first of all, you have questions about who's actually going to be on the roster. Obviously, Cam Johnson could be a trade candidate this offseason. Nick Claxton could be as well. I've talked about him as a potential fit with the Lakers for quite some time. So the Nets at 6th overall, I am going to go with a big man with the idea that Nick Claxton could be on the move this offseason via trade. 6th overall, the Brooklyn Nets here selecting Derik Queen from Maryland. Obviously, the former Montverde Academy teammate with Cooper Flagg. He had such a tremendous freshman season for himself. Just all of the advanced numbers stand out to you. And then, the true shooting percentage is quite strong. The free throw rate's really incredible. And there's growing belief that he can be a stretch big man. You think about the areas of the floor that he occupies, plays out of the top of the key a lot. Now, he did mostly do that out of the college top of the key, which is quite a bit different than the top of the key where he would find himself in delay action in the NBA. But I think that's specifically why I think this fit makes so much sense for me. He's so comfortable playing with the ball in his hands. He is a very natural driver of the ball, standing about 6'10". He's a really big kid, and I say that in a good way because you think about, the size that he possesses as a player, but he has pretty quick feet for his positional size and kind of, his play weight. He's not skinny and frail. He's not kind of one of those big men that is comparable to Chet Holmgren or Victor Wembanyama. Obviously, those two are such special, unique talents that I'm not comparing Derik Queen to them skill-wise either. But he does have a little bit of bulk to him, but he still moves his feet extremely well. He's very mobile. Think about his game winner we saw in the NCAA tournament, another example of that. But what I think in Brooklyn specifically with the amount of handoffs that they run with Jordi Fernandez's new offense that he brought over partially from Sacramento, now not quite as Mike Brown Zoom styled as the Kings were running for years with Domantas Sabonis, but still I think a prevalent part of their offense is playing out of delay action, playing with Zoom, playing with handoffs, and I think Derik Queen can be a really dynamic fit into that as someone who can beat his man off the dribble. You can pull the 5-man out from the rim, so you're thinking about the guy defending your center. He's not going to be at the rim a ton if Derik Queen's stretching out to the top of the key, and if you do believe in that shooting upside long term, I find myself fairly optimistic. I like the mechanics on his jump shot, and I think when it comes to if this kid's an actual gamer or not, if he can get down and improve his game year after year after year, I really do believe that. He's got the work ethic, he's got the motor, he's got the want to, and I think there's a lot here to like. 6th overall for Brooklyn. So for me, Derik Queen, 6th overall, I think fits on paper really well, fits the scheme very well, and is someone who has a significantly high ceiling that I think would be attainable under Jordi Fernandez's tutelage there in Brooklyn. Pick number 7, the Toronto Raptors, another team that could very, very well be looking at the big man spot. And I think for the Raptors specifically, it's an interesting team, right? They don't have the highest amount of three-point volume as you project what this team's going to look like next year with Brandon Ingram, who historically has not been a super high three-point attempt rate guy. Scotty Barnes is not the highest three-point attempt rate guy. Now, they do have some snipers in Grady Dick as one example. Jacoby Walters, another guy who I think long-term projects to be a pretty good shooter in the NBA. Emmanuel quickly has a quick trigger. He'll shoot off of pull-up threes out of pick and roll, right? But I think for Toronto specifically, if you're looking at ways to kind of improve your spacing without necessarily just drafting three-point shooting, there's a few ways to do it. One, you can look at lob threats. There's a few in this draft, and there's one that you're probably thinking of right now who got a ton of lobs this year in college basketball and is a massive human being. Another way to improve your team's gravity is having an elite screen setter. And you might be thinking of the same guy that you were thinking about for catching lobs. That player, 7th overall, Khaman Maluach out of Duke. And I think this is a player who, even though he doesn't shoot the ball, even though he's not the most skilled big man, where he's, this year for Duke, he did flow into dribble handoffs, but you can just tell when you're watching him versus Derik Queen, one guy is way more natural in those kinds of actions and sets. Khaman Maluach isn't the more natural player in those kinds of areas, but unlike Derik Queen, Maluach is a way better above the rim finisher. I think has really, really great touch around the rim. He has an incredible catch radius as well, something that I do think was a huge benefit to Cooper Flagg, to Kon Knueppel, to multiple Duke Blue Devils this year as a play finisher, a lob threat around the rim. And one thing that just really did not get enough love or enough attention throughout the entire year was how many screens this guy set and how well of a job he does setting screens. It's one of the most undervalued aspects of NBA basketball. It's really one of the most undervalued aspects of all of basketball, even down to grade school, high school, whatever, middle school. Screen setting does not get talked about enough. It doesn't get coached well enough by most coaches, and it doesn't get talked about at all by like 95% of media. Screen setting is such an important thing, and Khaman Maluach has a ton of examples of him being very, very good at it, whether it's off ball for Kon Knueppel or in 45 action with Cooper Flagg, something I could see being very, very good with Scotty Barnes in Toronto. Think about the way that Cooper Flagg and Maluach fit together. I think Scotty Barnes kind of can be a spitting image of that in a certain way, bringing some of those playmaking skills as a four-man. Think about the defensive flexibility between these two guys. You know, there are concerns with Maluach. He's not the best rebounder, and that's something that plagued him throughout the year and really was kind of a crushing part in the game against Houston, right? They did not rebound the ball at all very well as a team. He played 20-plus minutes and didn't rebound a single time, which is hard to imagine for a 7'2" guy with such a huge catch radius and someone who has been so functionally productive this year in smaller minutes for an elite team like Duke was. So for Toronto, you're getting a player who I think can improve your spacing, can improve your gravity without being a shooter, without being a stretch big man. And I think that's really important for this team roster construction right now. And I also think there is still room for this guy to grow from where he was with Basketball African League a couple of years ago. You know, I've been watching his film for about 3 years now at this point, 2.5, 3 years. I am very, 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 very impressed with how well of a freshman season he ultimately had. Now, I think the team context around him was very supportive for that, but I think that's what's important here about landing in Toronto. Unlike what I talked about with Charlotte earlier, who's kind of more of a blank canvas, a team that's still working on building up stuff, Toronto has good players. Toronto has players who are fringe all-star caliber guys. They have pieces here in Toronto that are young, build-around core pieces, and I think Maluach can be kind of a finishing touch to that, whereas in Charlotte, something that the Hornets have struggled with is instead of just having finishing touches, they're looking at finding guys who can be additive core pieces. And Maluach for me right now, like I think long-term can be a core piece for a team, but right now I think for his development and for his early success in the NBA, it's going to be better for him to land in a spot like Toronto where there's going to be that kind of nucleus and core infrastructure around him to help him succeed early, specifically with how reliant he is on finishing plays out of other players' playmaking at this current point in time. Pick number 8, the San Antonio Spurs on the clock here, and Spurs fans, it's that time of the week where I do my favorite thing and mock the San Antonio Spurs. Kon Knueppel, this kid is really, 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 really good at basketball. He is someone who, honestly, 8th overall might be getting underdrafted. He is so functional, and if you've been watching the mock drafts over the last 3-4 years, the one key word that probably stands out from all of my mock drafts in the last 3-4 draft cycles is functional. I preached on it about Amen Thompson and how his athleticism was different than any other athletic guard we've seen in the past. You know, I talked about it with Victor Wembanyama, how his functional tools and size are going to way outweigh anything we've seen from any other prospect in the last 20-30 years, which so far, early in Wembanyama's career, I feel like has rung very, very true. You know, I've talked about functional tools with VJ Edgecombe in this mock draft, talking about what he can do defensively. I'm telling you right now, everything Kon Knueppel does on the basketball court is functional. The way he plays off of 2 feet, the way he plays balance, the way he comes off of screens, the way he reads where his defender is when he's coming off the screen. Every single thing he does is through repetition and through very, very clear work and repetition that has helped him become a very great basketball player. He's not a 6'9" wing with a 40-plus inch vertical. But what he is a very, very, very good basketball player, and I continue to harp on that. Before the college basketball season started, back in October, I talked about how I thought this kid was going to be extremely overlooked to begin the college season. And you think about how he kind of came out early in the beginning of the year, first 2-3 games, was putting up 20-plus points pretty much every single night. And I think John Shire really instilled a lot of trust into him. Kon Knueppel was such an instrumental part of their offense as an off-ball mover, playing with the ball in his hands. And again, one word that I continue to use about him, decisive. He is extremely decisive. And I think for the Spurs specifically, if you're looking at integrating a player around Fox and around Wembanyama, you don't want someone who's going to take 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds to make a decision on stuff. You want someone who's going to be a quick thinker, a quick processor, and someone who can take advantage of closeouts, who can take advantage of ball reversals, and who can take advantage of open three-point looks. And Kon Knueppel does all of those things very, very well. It's check, check, check on that checklist there. And I think for the Spurs here, I continue to mock Kon Knueppel here. This is one of my favorite landing spots for any prospect in the entire draft. If the Spurs are drafting and Kon Knueppel is on the board, assuming they don't have the first or second overall pick, the Spurs need to take Kon Knueppel. He is a home run, A-plus level selection for the Spurs, 8th overall. Pick number 9, the Portland Trailblazers, who last week moved up through the lottery simulation. Now, of course, find themselves at pick 9 in this one with the order based on standings as of April 5th, the Saturday. But 9th overall, I have the Portland Trailblazers going with forward Collin Murray-Boyles from South Carolina. I think this is a really interesting mock selection from Portland, a team that I think throughout the year, especially with how poorly the beginning of the season started for them, they've shown some significant strides as a team. I think a lot of that stems from Deni Avdija. A lot of that stems from Toumani Camara, who has had a real breakout season for them as well. We've seen a lot of sample from guys like Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson, some of those huge upside picks that the Blazers made very early in the top half of the lottery, both with Shaedon Sharpe at 7, Scoot Henderson 3rd overall a few years ago. The Blazers have seen progression from those guys too, and some really key moments from them where they've stepped up and performed at a super high level. I think this has been a real build year for Scoot Henderson compared to where his rookie season was from an efficiency standpoint, and just from an overall feel of the game standpoint. He just looks much better every time I turn on the Blazers. It's not every single night, but I'm seeing that development from him, and I think Shaedon Sharpe specifically, he's kind of got that mentality to him that you love to see. And I think for what Portland's missing right now, it's someone who brings that kind of impact again into their front court, who can be another impactful young contributor to their team, like we've talked about with guys like Shaedon Sharpe, Toumani Camara, Deni Avdija, who was a brilliant trade acquisition for them this past summer. 9th overall, the Blazers getting Collin Murray-Boyles. This kid screams impact. The Gamecocks were terrible this year. Their team net rating was negative. They were not any good. They couldn't win any games. And yet, Collin Murray-Boyles was like a plus 19 net rating. So when he was on the court, the Gamecocks were really, really good. And when he was off the court, they were terrible. Utterly terrible, to the point where they were so bad that it outweighed even how good they were with him on the floor. And I think for Portland specifically, one thing that they have right now, they have some veteran players. I don't think they have super huge impact veteran players like, DeAndre Ayton. I think the impact comes and goes. Jeremy Grant, you guys know if you've been watching the channel for a while, I'm not super extremely high on him, even though the shooting splits are typically pretty good. He's just not this huge effort, high rebound per game forward that I would love to see in this kind of lineup. Collin Murray-Boyles does a lot of the little things well. He's very connective as a passer. He knows how to cut intuitively. And one thing that I really love about this fit, some people are going to say, well, what about the shooting? Donovan Clingan doesn't stretch the floor really yet at this point in time. What Donovan Clingan does do is pass very, very well, and you can use him in delay action out of the top of the key as a playmaking hub, and that opens up cutting options for Collin Murray-Boyles to still functionally score around the rim without Donovan Clingan kind of mucking up that spacing for him. So I think this is a really unique fit. It's maybe not the cleanest fit come playoff time, but I think for the Blazers, if you get to the playoffs, it's a huge home run success story. So I think right now it's just about getting impact players, guys who can impactfully win games for you and help you win games. Collin Murray-Boyles checks off a lot of those qualities as well as a passer, a cutter, a defender, a finisher. Just very, very solid player. And I think for Portland, fills a lot of their current existing needs in terms of impact. Pick number 10, the Miami Heat now on the clock. Remember, this pick is lottery protected, owed to Oklahoma City as well. So the Thunder, if you're a Thunder fan watching, you might be saying, oh no, we're not getting the picks from Philadelphia and Miami. I think Thunder fans are going to be okay. You guys are such a good team. Right now, my current pick to win the Western Conference, and I feel very, very confident in that. But 10th overall, the Miami Heat here, I have selecting guard Kasparas Jakucionis from Illinois. I talked about him earlier as a potential guy who could have maybe even gone as high as 4, and throughout this year, we've seen him kind of mocked in this range, 4 to 10. And Jakucionis, one thing that I think is really undersold with people talking about him right now is how exquisitely he occupies big men in drop coverage in the pick and roll. Like, everyone knows, yes, he's a playmaking guard. Everyone knows, yes, he is someone who looks to assist the rock. He's not the most athletic player, like very high three-point rate, and some of that out of necessity because he's not beating his man off the dribble a ton. Those are some concerns. But if you want to think about how well this guy could fit next to Bam Adebayo, who's another really good dribble handoff big man, this is the kind of example where if Jakucionis comes off of a handoff, he can be a threat to make three-pointers, whether it be out of his step back or out of pull-ups, playing off of Adebayo. And he also can do a very good job drawing in Bam's defender, so when Bam kind of does his little short roll to the rim, get him the ball about 12, 13 feet away from the hoop, Bam Adebayo has a ton of touch in that area of the floor. I think this is a really unique fit between prospect and team. Jakucionis' fit in Miami, like, listen, for a team that really, really cares about physical, kind of your physical fitness, how well you're in shape, I think Jakucionis can be benefited by being in this kind of weight room, this kind of team culture. Not that I don't think he's out of shape really, but I think just like getting a little bit stronger, getting into a better physical physique to deal with ball pressure and to deal with quicker defenders specifically. If he gets a little bit stronger, puts on a little bit more muscle and a little bit more girth to his body frame, it can help him hold his driving lines a little bit better. I think that's going to be very beneficial for him as well. And, the one thing too, I think with the playmaking around him, with Tyler Hero taking, I think, a pretty significant step this year forward as an individual player. And again, I talked about Bam Adebayo being someone who can initiate offense for you. Jakucionis kind of fits into a little bit of a healthier team context than what it was at Illinois, where I think, honestly, watching Illinois this year, it just felt like Jakucionis had to create a majority of their offense. I'm not a huge Kylan Boswell guy. So for me, it just kind of felt like when Jakucionis didn't have the ball, a lot of good stuff wasn't going to happen for Illinois. Whereas for Miami, I think he can be more of an additive playmaker instead of the sole playmaker like he was for the Fighting Illini. Pick number 11, the Houston Rockets now. This pick, of course, comes from the Phoenix Suns, and the Rockets, they're going to be a hot topic of discussion all offseason long, so get ready to start hearing about, will they trade this pick? Will it be for Kevin Durant? Whispers here, whispers there. What about Devin Booker? Giannis Antetokounmpo, is he okay staying in Milwaukee? There's going to be all these questions, right? I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section of what you think the Rockets will do. But assuming they don't trade this pick, I have the Rockets here 11th overall selecting guard Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma, another really high boom prospect, someone with significant upside here as a young player. You think about another guard, another young player who reclassified up. Cooper Flagg, of course, was the headliner of who reclassified to ultimately get their name in the 2025 NBA draft. Jeremiah Fears had such a great freshman season with Oklahoma that he has now really solidified himself as a very, very likely lottery pick, a very possible top 10 pick as well. Have him just outside of that range here, 11th overall now. But Jeremiah Fears is someone who has thrived on hitting big shot after big shot this year. You think about the huge moment he had against Michigan earlier this year where he hit a dagger and 1 3-pointer. And also I think one thing that really stands out to me watching the film is his ability to quickly make reads out of the pick and roll and understanding that, hey, when I come off this screen, I'm probably going to get met with a hedge or a blitz, and I can get off the ball quickly to my roll man. He's someone who I think with Alperen Şengün could form a very unique two-man game, specifically weaponizing the short roll. And then you think about Amen Thompson being the guy cutting out of the corner or sitting out of the dunker spot, how often we've seen him catch lobs and finish around the rim as well. Jeremiah Fears could be a very interesting long-term additive offensive weapon for the Houston Rockets. Now, there are going to be some kind of bumps in the road as well, and Rockets fans, get ready to take your medicine with this. A team that's really struggled at shooting threes this year, Jeremiah Fears shot sub 30% from three this season. So even though, you see the big shots, if you're a highlight watcher, Jeremiah Fears stands out as, oh my God, this guy's going to be so good. He's got the name grade for it, right? He's got a Hall of Fame name with the last name Fears, and he has a Hall of Fame highlight clip too. He's someone who looks really, really, really exciting when you just watch only the positive plays. But when you watch a full game, you're like, okay, well, he doesn't really move off the ball that well. The three-point shot is at best streaky. This is a long-term projection pick, and for Houston, if you do ultimately make this pick, you still have Reed Sheppard waiting in the wings. You have Cam Whitmore. You might make some big trade for somebody like we talked about. The Rockets, this could be like a draft and stash kind of selection for them where, yeah, he spends a lot of time with the G League his first maybe 2 seasons in the league, but by the time, you have some needs as your roster gets more expensive, that's where maybe Jeremiah Fears could break out and be a big-time contributor for a team, and that's what I'd be hoping for 11th overall if you're the Houston Rockets. Pick number 12, the Chicago Bulls here now, a team that has had some really, really strong guard play as of late. Josh Giddey, of course, starting to turn some heads in a positive way. And then obviously Coby White, multiple Player of the Week awards. It's just been really, really incredible the second half of the season. For most of the year, honestly. I don't want to short sell what he's done, but the second half of the year specifically has been a real standout and a huge reason why the Bulls are winning games. He's been playing great basketball, and they've been able to stay afloat even after trading Zach LaVine for pennies on the dollar, I think a lot of would argue. Now, they did save a lot of dollars on that contract too, so that's part of why they made that decision. But 12th overall here, the Bulls. I have selecting forward Noah Essengue from Ratiopharm, someone who's kind of in this back end of the lottery, maybe fringe outside the lottery kind of draft range for me this year. I think with him specifically, what I like about this fit, Chicago already has the playmaking nucleus with Giddey and Coby White, and then obviously Vucevic can do a little bit of that kind of stuff as well, whether it be out of delay action or post up offense, something that is becoming a little bit more sparing in the NBA outside of Nikola Jokic, but nonetheless, they have kind of guys who can be your facilitators, playmakers of offense. Noah Essengue has proven to be an effective and efficient play finisher of offense. Now, I've seen people throw out comparisons to some really great NBA players. I don't think Noah Essengue has that kind of upside. I think he is going to be very firmly just a play finisher, an advantage finisher, someone who, if you get to a 4-on-3 or a 3-on-2 or you get a 2-and-1 in transition, Essengue is going to be very, 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 very good in those areas. And he has the physical tools to be an above-the-rim lob threat. He can attack closeouts effectively, and he can shoot open jump shots at a reliable rate to make him worthy of a fringe lottery-level selection, which is why Chicago takes him here 12th overall. Now, if you're betting on the upside of him being like Matas Buzelis was, who was a home run pick for the Bulls this past draft, seemingly, even though there have been some struggles that people aren't going to harp on because he's a rookie. There's a reason Buzelis finished on my board where he did, and I still feel justified for the most part with where that is. Unlike Buzelis, Essengue can't really handle the ball. He can't hold the drive lane. He's about as skinny as Buzelis, but he doesn't have the on-ball tools that Buzelis had as a prospect, even going back to his high school days at Sunrise Christian. For Buzelis, I just don't think Essengue is going to be that type of player, and that's okay. I still think it fits pretty well here for Chicago as a kind of two-way player with pretty good length and obviously a ton of play finishing skills that will be valuable next to Giddey, next to Coby White, next to Buzelis, next to Nikola Vucevic there in Chicago. Pick number 13, the Atlanta Hawks here now. This pick via the Sacramento Kings, part of the Kevin Huerter trade from a few years ago. Atlanta, I think a team that obviously has stolen the hearts of many with the way Dyson Daniels has played this year. Been a very fun, exciting team to watch. Now, I think there are still some significant strides this team has to take moving forward to improve their roster. And it's going to start here by drafting guard Jase Richardson out of Michigan State, someone who I think for the better half of the better part of the first half of the season, every draft lunatic like myself was sitting there saying, why does this kid not have the ball more? Why does he not get to play in isolation more? Why does he not get to play out of the pick and roll more? And throughout the year, we saw that kind of usage and that, kind of load tick upward in a way that he was becoming more central to Michigan State's offense. Now, they had a pretty good end of their season. Obviously, most teams that get to the NCAA tournament, 63 of the 64 teams, 67 of the 68 teams, in fact, have a bad end to the season because they all end on a loss besides the one national championship winner, whether that be Florida, Houston. We'll see tonight. But Jase Richardson specifically for me is a guy that you think about not needing to scale him up too much in Atlanta, playing next to Trae Young, someone who is the highest usage, highest heliocentric player in the league, and Atlanta really relies on him to be that. But it could be a guy who can fit within that, where he can play off of Trae Young, but doesn't need to just only let Trae Young be Trae Young. Like, he's someone who can take control of your offense, play out of handoffs, play out of advantage, and then also create advantage a bit for himself as well. And I think that's where finding that balance is going to be pretty easy for Jase Richardson playing in Atlanta next to a player like Trae Young, whereas some other players might not scale into that role comfortably. I do think Jase Richardson has the tools to very comfortably fit into that, and he's not going to be overtaxed or kind of overstretched one way or another, whether you're kind of playing through Trae Young even more than you currently do or as much as you currently do, or if you kind of succeed some of that to Jase Richardson, I think that can be successful as well. Pick 14, the Dallas Mavericks here now at this spot in the draft. Now, I do want to talk about a player who I did not include in this mock draft. That is Bennett Sturts, the Drake guard who transferred to Iowa. I do not have him in this mock draft because I think there's a very good chance he does not go through the NBA draft process at all. Now, I'm not sure, right? There's still time here for him to make a decision on that. Now, we do know he will play at Iowa if he does not go to the NBA draft, but this would be a player who'd be in consideration for this pick. He's not in this mock draft, so 14th overall at the Dallas Mavericks here, selecting guard Nolan Traore, the French prospect. Remember, was a player who very, very, very well was getting talked about as a top 3 projected pick coming into this draft cycle. Even by yours truly here, myself, I was looking at Traore as a guy who, especially with how he ended his season last year, playing overseas, very, very productive, broke a record for scoring in a game for, I don't remember the exact specifications on that game, but was really productive. He had like a 47, 48 point performance. And just hasn't really followed that up this year with better play. Now, he is playing professional basketball compared to kids who are playing college basketball. It is a quite stark difference. And I think better pacing and space in the NBA could benefit him from an efficiency standpoint. One thing that he does very well that would fit with Dallas is utilize rollers. Now, he's predominantly utilized rollers as kind of dump-off passes and bounce passes and pocket passes. For the Mavericks, you're thinking about lobs and playing above the rim a little bit more, so I think there's going to be kind of a developmental era here for Nolan Traore in Dallas. But nonetheless, you think about a team that really badly needs playmaking after trading away Luka Doncic and losing Kyrie Irving to an ACL injury. The Mavericks are a team that needs guard play. Very pointedly, they need another guy who can handle the basketball, can maneuver and pick and roll play. Traore can do that. He still has a very quick first step, and I think the upside, even though he's shooting sub 50% true shooting percentage wise, playing overseas right now, he can be a guy for Dallas that I think stands out as another ball handler, another contributor for them, and I do think long-term would probably be an upgrade over Dante Exum into their rotation as soon as next season. Pick number 15, the San Antonio Spurs here now, again on the clock after drafting Kon Knueppel in the top 10. They have the 15th overall pick here via Atlanta. And with this selection, I have the San Antonio Spurs selecting forward Carter Bryant from Arizona. And I am just over the moon right now with the use of these 2 draft picks for the Spurs. I went on and raved about Kon Knueppel fitting into San Antonio. Carter Bryant's another really intriguing long-term upside. Out of all the players we've talked about so far, Carter Bryant is the absolute lowest usage player among the first 15 selections. And you might be saying, okay, well, that's a little weird because you're talking about a player who, this is where people are going to start throwing around the word potential and upside. I'm telling you right now, I'm not a huge believer in Carter Bryant's offensive upside, offensive potential. I don't look at him as this guy who, well, he has such physical gifts. He could be a 20-point per game scorer. No, I don't believe that. But what I do think is this guy could be really additive into winning ways in San Antonio. And if you're a Spurs fan, first of all, you already know a lot about winning. You guys have done so much of it throughout my entire lifetime and before. But the other thing about Carter Bryant here, and specifically for San Antonio that you'd be excited about, is how he specifically fits into your roster after drafting Kon Knueppel already. Last year, I talked about Stephon Castle pretty much all draft cycle for San Antonio. It just felt like a Spurs pick. And I think Spurs fans really love Stephon Castle. I can really picture this team ending this draft with both Kon Knueppel, Carter Bryant, and just saying, yeah, we've got the absolute right core to build around Victor Wembanyama with. We have now a franchise point guard in De'Aaron Fox. We have this hybrid combo guard who can guard anyone 1 through 3 in the NBA comfortably. He's super strong, has very good coordination skills. And if he continues to blossom and grow as a shooter over the next 2-3 years in Stephon Castle, you'd be really excited. You have, your obvious Devin Vassell, who's kind of right now the jury's out on. A lot of people in San Antonio, I think, are starting to question his fit long term. I still think he's going to be a core nucleus piece for the Spurs team. And then you put in 2 guys like Kon Knueppel, who's an elite decisive player off the catch. You have someone who, in Carter Bryant, can be an awesome dive threat, an awesome cutter out of the corner, someone who connected on 37+% of his threes this year as a college freshman, playing in a power conference. I'm very excited about Carter Bryant's fit here with San Antonio. Another guy who has an incredible catch radius, very functional as a cutter, diver, lob threat out of the corner. I just think this is the type of player that, in a lot of settings, like, this isn't an upside grab, but this is hey, hey, this guy's super, super toolsy, and we have the pieces around him to weaponize those tools for our offense. And, I think an example, it's not really a comparison at all, but you think about Aaron Gordon, right? Like, was putting up some numbers for Orlando, but it never really contributed to winning. He got with Nikola Jokic, and all of a sudden the lob catching, the utilization out of the corner, the defensive versatility became so much better and so much more important. I think that's what Carter Bryant can bring to San Antonio. It's not that he's going to be this 20 point per game scorer where he's this super high upside pick. It's the tools that he has fit really well when you have a 7'5" freak of nature in Victor Wembanyama who can pass really well, draws so much attention, draws so many double teams, and is obviously someone who can stretch the floor too, can play make out of the short roll. Like, there's just so much upside here and a lot to be excited about if you're San Antonio. It makes drafting players really easy because you think about who can fit with Wembanyama. The answer is almost anybody. Carter Bryant's one that stands out to me as a really, really intriguing pick, though, because of his athletic tools and functional skills that already exist despite his low usage rate. Pick number 16, the Orlando Magic, a team that does have their core building blocks in place. Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Jalen Suggs. Now, of course, injuries have really derailed this team's season, unfortunately for them. And I do think going forward, there's a lot to build on still for this team. 16th overall, I have them selecting guard Egor Demin from BYU, someone who right now there's still a ton of buzz around as a potential lottery pick. I do think that is not crazy to think at all, just given his size. Teams love positional size, and Orlando is one of those main culprits who every single year they're looking for size, length, and they typically do draft that. Now, Egor Demin hasn't been the most productive college basketball player. There's been stretches and waves where he played really, really elite hoops, and then there were stretches where he played very, very poorly and had very little, small, low impact for BYU. Now, it is not a foregone conclusion that he will be in the NBA draft. There are some rumblings right now that he could be returning to BYU, and that's a part of this lucrative NIL era that we're seeing in college basketball where, a guy like Egor Demin, if you're going to be pick 15, pick 18 in the draft, you might make comparable amounts of money playing college basketball. And when you have AJ DeBonsa coming, maybe you can help improve your draft stock for the 2026 draft in comparison to the 2025 NBA draft. It's going to be an interesting NIL transfer period that we see here. There's going to be some guys who are NBA level players who are likely first round picks, like a Bennett Sturts, like a Egor Demin, who might not come out of the NBA draft. But nonetheless, assuming Egor Demin does actually declare for the draft and does actually stay in the draft, Orlando could be a team I see picking him, looking at his playmaking tools. Very good assist rate this year for BYU, now very high and alarming turnover rate as well. And this is kind of, I've talked about this in previous mocks, but he's a high leverage playmaker, someone who is very gutsy, very, in some ways, ballsy as a passer because he's going to try and thread the needle. He's going to make passes that sometimes are going to get looked at and say, whoa, why are you throwing that? But then it happens to get through and it leads to a bucket. And that's what you're going to kind of get here with Egor Demin. Now, I think for Orlando, I would prioritize shooting and I would prioritize speed, quickness over length at this point in time for them. But this is their kind of draft strategy. They've typically looked at length, they've looked at positional size, and they've drafted those things over the last 4 or 5 years for the most part. So Egor Demin stands out to me as a guy that they could look at taking. But they have 2 picks in this first round. There's a variety of ways they could go. I landed on Demin here, 16th overall for them in this mock draft. Pick 17, the Minnesota Timberwolves here now. This pick via the Detroit Pistons through the New York Knicks, part of the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. And for Minnesota specifically, there's a lot that I view as possible needs for them. Obviously, there's questions about Naz Reid's future in Minnesota, given how much he will likely command as a free agent. Nickeil Alexander-Walker's another gotta-have-him kind of guy, in my opinion, for the Minnesota Timberwolves, because he's such a core piece fitting around Anthony Edwards long-term, in my opinion. So 17th overall, we're going to look at trying to find a way to add to their front court if they find a way to salary dump Julius Randle. 17th overall, I have the Timberwolves here selecting Danny Wolf in Michigan. It's going to say Timberwolves on the front and Wolf on the back here with Danny Wolf landing in Minnesota. But here's the thing that I love about Danny Wolf. The playmaking feel is there, and I think specifically if you look at his success next to Vlad Golden for Michigan, and you go back to watching 2024 film on Minnesota, you look at the way Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert coexisted, the two big men forming a lob threat comparison together, a lob threat connection, and really seeing Rudy Gobert minimize Karl-Anthony Towns' defensive deficiencies by being at the rim, allowing Cat to challenge on the perimeter a little bit more comfortably, and really mitigating some of his concerns defensively. I think Gobert could have that similar impact, that similar presence next to Danny Wolf, which kind of mitigate some of the concerns I think a lot of people would have about viewing him as a center. I think viewing him as this hybrid tweener forward makes sense, where if you view him and you see him landing with another team that has a big man, like Minnesota, like Oklahoma City, that's been kind of the common theme in a lot of my mock drafts here. If you already have another 7-footer that you could see him playing with, like a Chet Holmgren, like a Rudy Gobert in this example, Danny Wolf becomes such an intriguing fit because of his usage of 45 action, where he's the primary ball handler, receiving screens. And I also think if you want to view him as a potential short roller, lob thrower to Rudy Gobert, that could work in a variety of ways. I think Danny Wolf just brings that connectivity into Minnesota's offense that they're missing after trading Karl-Anthony Towns to the Big Apple. Pick number 18, the Brooklyn Nets here now via the Milwaukee Bucks. This pick is one of many that they got from the Mikal Bridges trade with New York. 18th overall, I have the Nets here selecting forward Liam McNeeley, who did not have a productive season really at all for UConn, but I think this is an upside snag here for Brooklyn. And it's funny, Liam McNeeley is not the type of player you're going to typically hear upside associated with, but I do think in terms of his upside, even though I'm not talking like superstar potential or anything crazy like that, I think he can play much better than he did in his freshman year for the UConn Huskies. And I think a big part of that, and I talked about this last mock draft, the Huskies just did not have a real playmaking nucleus to their team. They kind of relied on playmaking by committee, whereas last year, they had Tristan Newton, they had Stephon Castle, they had Donovan Clingan. Those were probably their 3 best passers last year. They lost all 3 of them to the NBA draft. So it was kind of a rebuild year for UConn. And unfortunately, there was a few players who had their draft stocks hurt because of it. Liam McNeeley was one of them. Former Montverde Academy teammate with Cooper Flagg, really thrived and succeeded for Montverde Academy, playing next to Derik Queen, next to Asa Newell, playing next to Cooper Flagg, and a plethora of other great high school basketball players there for Montverde. And then also Alex Caravan, another guy who we literally saw his efficiencies plummet because of the roster around him. So I think for Brooklyn here, a team that you already drafted Derik Queen, you're reuniting 2 Montverde Academy teammates here, 6th and 18th overall. But then you're also looking at Queen's playmaking. You're looking at the ability to stretch the floor, and you're hoping that Liam McNeeley can be such a clean, easy fit into that because of his play finishing attributes, which were absolute cheat codes for Montverde. Now with NBA spacing, NBA playmaking, Liam McNeeley can be a lot more successful in the NBA game than he was in his lone season of college basketball, in my opinion. Pick number 19, the Washington Wizards on the clock here. Remember, 2nd overall, they went with Dylan Harper. This pick becoming more and more attractive with the way the Grizzlies season has gone. Obviously, Taylor Jenkins getting fired. Washington's got to be smiling ear to ear right now. 19th overall, I have them selecting center Asa Newell. We're going to stay with another Montverde Academy alum. Asa Newell obviously had a productive season for Georgia. Now, the Bulldogs weren't a great college basketball team, but Asa Newell was extremely productive for them, had a very, very, very strong offensive rating. And the reason for that specifically, with one of the better offensive ratings out of all college prospects in this year's draft, is because of his offensive rebounding rate, averaged a ton of offensive rebounds per game. And now Wizards fans are going to be saying, well, wait a minute. We had Jonas Valanciunas and Alex Sarr. Sarr wasn't really comfortable playing in that way. Why would we draft another big man? This is, again, something I harped on last week. I've harped on in multiple mock drafts in the past. 48 minutes of center play. You need to have center depth. You cannot just rely on having one good caliber big man. If you ever want to win games at a high level in the NBA, you have to have multiple 7-footers, multiple bigs who can play. And if you're Washington and you're thinking about, okay, well, now with Dylan Harper, we have this unique kind of pick and pop threat with Sarr. How about when Sarr's off the floor? Oh, well, let's give him Asa Newell, who's an awesome screen and roll big, who has really good touch around the rim and gets on the offensive glass like none other in this draft class. That's really exciting for Washington. That's exactly why I go with Asa Newell in this pick. It gives you scheme versatility with Dylan Harper. It gives you a guy who can set screens and roll compared to screen and pop. Sarr can maybe do the screen short roll kind of game a little bit better than Newell can, although Newell has very unique touch, obviously stretched the floor a little bit this year, didn't find a ton of success as a shooter. I think at the heart of his game, he's going to be best rolling to the rim, being around the rim, being a high volume rebounder on the offensive end of the floor, but nonetheless, 19th overall, I think Washington very happy here, walking away in a draft with both Dylan Harper and Asa Newell at picks 2 and 19 respectively. Pick number 20, the Oklahoma City Thunder here. This pick, of course, is a draft pick swap with the Los Angeles Clippers. 20th overall, the Thunder, who very well could have multiple other picks in this draft if the season played out a little bit differently. Still an example here of the rich getting richer, one of the best team defenses we've seen in recent years. A team that has so much individual defensive talent, whether it be Isaiah Hartenstein, who's one of the better big men defenders in the league. Obviously, Chet Holmgren's a freakish unicorn-type player on both ends of the floor. And then you look at Lou Dort, who really should be getting Defensive Player of the Year consideration. Cason Wallace, another really great defender. This team just has so many great defenders just up and down their lineup. I can't go on and on and on about them all because it'd take another hour in this video to get through it all. But 20th overall here, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder selecting forward Rasheer Fleming out of St. Joseph's. And the reason why I prefaced this pick of Rasheer Fleming with their team defenses, you think about what they have. They have the bigs who can protect the rim. They have drop coverage bigs. They have, kind of this elite rim protection. They have this elite, strong on-ball defensive presence. What they don't have is like the 6'8", 6'9", forward defender, someone who, if you think about a hypothetical finals matchup with the Boston Celtics, you'd say, well, okay, who are we putting on Jason Tatum? Or you think back to last year's playoff setting against the Dallas Mavericks, where Lou Dort is so strong that you obviously can put him on Luka Doncic, but Rasheer Fleming brings this kind of different combination of length and size that Lou Dort just doesn't have with his frame. Now, Lou Dort's built like a linebacker, built like a football player. Rasheer Fleming's built like an NBA power forward, small forward, where he's bigger, taller, lengthier, athletic, and he can guard up the lineup a little bit more comfortably. Now, the upside, you might be saying, okay, well, if this guy addresses such a huge need for a team that's so great defensively, why doesn't he go way earlier in this mock draft? He has like no offensive upside. He was a terrible driver of the basketball at St. Joseph's, playing in the A-10. He's not playing against the SEC regularly, right? This is not a player who's even in the Big Ten, right? There's not, like, the upside is just not here with Rasheer Fleming to warrant other teams taking him before pick 18, pick 20, whatever it may be. Like, I could see Minnesota at 17 doing it. But I think for Oklahoma City specifically, this is like one of the big things of, like, if you go look at a checklist of, hey, what does our roster have and don't have? This is like one of the few things it doesn't have right now is a player built like Rasheer Fleming, height, weight, lengthwise, and he shoots the ball well. So it's like he fits into your team offense. This is not a franchise, not a team that needs to take upside swings moving forward. This is a team that's looking for guys who can continue to fit in to the system, fit into the roster around their core nucleus of guys in Chet Holmgren. Jalen Williams, another guy who I should have mentioned as an elite defender. What he does night in, night out is really, really impactful and important for them. And then obviously Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the guy that makes everything work offensively especially. So the Thunder here get kind of a missing cog, a missing piece into their defensive identity without really impacting their offense at all in a negative way. Pick number 21, the Utah Jazz here now on the clock. This pick comes from those Timberwolves who had pick number 17. 21st overall, I have the Jazz here selecting wing Will Riley. So after getting Cooper Flagg to kick off this mock draft, the Jazz now at 21 will take another upside wing. And I think just specifically, I've talked about it at length throughout the year, but the Jazz just need more length. They need more wings. They need more forward type players. Getting Cooper Flagg next to Lauri Markkanen, next to Walker Kessler obviously makes your team a lot bigger. It also makes your team way more talented. And now Will Riley gives you kind of that upside player alongside this, where you have kind of your building blocks pieces. You have your, hey, these are the guys who are going to be good and impactful around Cooper Flagg. Can we hit one more time outside of the lottery? Can we take a stab on a player here with real shot-making upside and potential? Now, it didn't always stand out this year at Illinois, but he had a really strong assist-to-turnover rate, only a 9% turnover rate, which is very, very strong. Now, he only did make 32% of his threes this year, but if you think about the difficulty, the volume, I think it's acceptable, and I think it's something that you'd be pretty comfortable betting on long-term. Had a 23.8 usage rate, and still was a plus 10 net rating for the Fighting Illini this year. So I think for Will Riley specifically, you're looking at a player who can fit off the ball, hopefully long-term. This is going to be a player who needs to spend time in the G League. Just very point blank, he does. He's not ready to play heavy NBA minutes, but the Jazz might still afford that to him anyway in tanking efforts, even in Cooper Flagg's first NBA season, because if they could get another top 3 pick next year with Boozer and Peterson and Dybonsa, oh my gosh, watch out for Utah. But Will Riley's definitely a guy that I think Danny Ainge would really strongly consider 21st overall, given the upside profile he projects to have. Pick 22, the Indiana Pacers, one of my favorite teams to talk about. Obi Toppin's been playing good basketball for this team lately. And, you know, in a lot of my other videos, I talk about the value of stretch big men and delay action. I talk about stretching the floor and having a big who can shoot it. The Pacers have that with Miles Turner. Let's get them a big who can kind of play out of the similar spots on the floor for when Miles Turner's out of the game. You think about, you know, obviously the injuries that they sustained this year to Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson, then obviously finding that Band-Aid with Thomas Bryant. We're looking at a long-term kind of backup big for them. 22nd overall of the Indiana Pacers selecting center Alex Condon from Florida. And what I want you to watch for tonight, if you're watching this on Monday for the actual mock draft Monday and you're watching this and you're watching the NCAA tournament championship game tonight, I want you to watch Alex Condon play make out of the top of the key. I want you to watch him trigger into dribble handoffs. And if the dribble handoff isn't there, or if he doesn't think advantage is going to be there, out of the handoff, he won't hand the ball off. What he does is he picks up his dribble, reverse pivots, and realizes, hey, now that I screened your guy with my body, I can pass it to you as a cutter. And that's really, really useful. And I think for Indiana specifically, that could fit really good with Obi Toppin, someone who was kind of this dynamic cutting screening threat for Dayton when he was in college. Alex Condon could be a really good fit there. Halliburton's kind of shifted his role from last year where he was on the ball all the time to this year being off the ball more and more and more. And they found a lot of success with that. Condon could be this unique playmaking hub for them out of the second unit. And it's not like, listen, I'm not saying Alex Condon's going to average 7 assists per game or anything in the NBA. He's just not. That's not the reality. But he can be a positive contributing player for them, and they already have so much talent. They already have so much depth that a playmaking type of big man here for them actually just makes so much sense. You know, in previous mocks, I've looked at guards. I've looked at defensive-minded wings like a Thiero or Rasheer Fleming. I landed on Condon with this pick, and I'm really talking myself into it more and more here. I really do like this pick a lot for Indiana. Again, like I said, watch for that specific trait, the playmaking, the court vision, the court understanding and awareness that Condon plays with. Watch for that tonight in the national championship game. Pick number 23, the Miami Heat here now. This pick via the Golden State Warriors. From the Jimmy Butler trade, Golden State just keeps winning and winning and winning, and as a result, this pick keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. But it's still a good asset here for Miami to add to their roster after drafting Kasparas Jakucionis at pick number 10. I have them here selecting wing Thiero from Arkansas, someone who unfortunately did not play in the NCAA tournament because of injury. Missed that time. I thought would have been a really great springboard for him to maybe solidify himself as a potential lottery pick. But nonetheless, I have him 23rd overall here. Someone who is extremely productive this year, specifically as a cutter. If you look at his 2-point percentage on the season, he actually connected on 61% of his 2-point attempts. Now, did make just sub 26% of his three. So that's where, as a junior prospect, the concern is there. He had a 17% of 3-point attempt rate, though. So someone who doesn't shoot a lot of threes and doesn't make them when he shoots them. So that's going to be a problem inherently for Miami. But again, you think about the touch that Bam Adebayo possesses. Thiero could maybe be your backside, weak side wing cutter, corner cutter, something he did very well playing off of Boogie Fland for Arkansas this year. And he does have extremely gaudy free throw rate numbers, 69% free throw rate, which is just incredible. He gets to the line a lot. He has a ton of functional athletic tools, plays in the gaps defensively really well. This just screams like Eric Spoelstra to me when I watch Thiero play. I'm like, this is a player that a team like Oklahoma City or Miami or Boston, some of the smart teams around the league would just find a way to get this guy. Getting him here toward the end of the first round, it just feels like a Miami Heat thing. Everything here just checks the box of like, hey, this guy's going to end up being good in the NBA, and if you give him to the right team with the right kind of identity and culture and the right kind of coaching, he's just going to succeed because he does so many things very, very well, even though he's not like the most blatantly obvious, hey, look, this guy shoots the ball really well. Like, he doesn't have that in his resume, but he has a lot of the other things, and that's why he might go through the cracks a little bit. 23rd overall, though, Miami's going to scoop him up and be very, very happy with the result long term. 24, we're back onto the Orlando Magic here. And Orlando, after drafting Egor Demin at pick number 16, I have them here selecting center Johan Berenger, playing in France this year. Now, here's the thing with Berenger, for me specifically. I think the athletic tools are there. There's really no production at this point. He's averaging 4 points per game playing international basketball, but you're looking at someone who has really great baseline athletic traits and athletic tools. I've been pretty hesitant to mock him in round 1 despite ESPN throughout the course of the year being very, very prevalent in mocking him in the first round. Now, I think as we've gotten closer to the end of this process and specifically looking at which guys are going to withdraw from the NBA draft and not actually declare, like, it actually kind of does make sense that he could be a first-round pick to me. Like, the more that's kind of cemented itself in my head, because I'm like, okay, well, this player might not declare. This player is going to withdraw from the draft. Maybe NIL's changing the landscape of the NBA draft in a big way. And it opens up more spots for guys like Behringer to be possible first-round picks, and that's what I see here for Orlando, drafting a toolsy big man. They found so much success with guys like Goga Bitadze, Wendell Carter. Jamal Mosley's a really great defensive-minded coach, and I think if you find a way to give him a toolsy big like Behringer, who has great, physical gifts in terms of, athletic play vertically, he's explosive, and he does know how to position his body well and play with that verticality. I think that's where you can really find a lot of benefit for Orlando here. I think, again, this is not a player who's going to contribute massively in year 1. His production overseas right now is not great. It would be pretty ridiculous to expect him to be an elite producer in year 1 of his NBA career. But I do think there's a lot of the tools and traits that would project him to being, a very possible first-round pick, especially for a team like Orlando who could be looking at their long-term center spot with some question marks. Pick number 25, the Atlanta Hawks here now on the clock yet again after going with Jase Richardson at pick number 13. They have pick 25 via the Los Angeles Lakers. I have them selecting forward Yaxel Lendeberg from UAB. Significant news for Lendeberg. He did commit officially to Michigan, but will keep his name in the NBA draft for now. Now, we're not sure if he's actually going to officially stick in the NBA draft or not. Obviously, he has the ability to withdraw. Worst case, he'll be playing for Dusty May and be a souped-up version of maybe what Danny Wolf was this year in their 45 actions, and a very different kind of player than Danny Wolf. Maybe a little bit less skilled offensively, but way more athletic and defensively extremely impactful. So part of me is rooting for him to go back to college just so I can see him play as the power forward for the Michigan Wolverines. But I do think when it comes to his overall game, and one thing that I think stands out for me with Atlanta is how defensive event creation oriented their defense has been this year, and how much better off they've been because of that defensively. Of course, Dyson Daniels being an on-ball disruptor has been such a huge part of that defensive philosophy and overturn. But getting another guy here with extremely gaudy steal rate, block rates. Right now, I'm going to read you his steal rate and block percentage this year. It's just video game type stuff. 5.2% block rate and a 2.9% steal rate. So very, very good for him. And then also posted a 23% assist rate as well this year. So a lot of the advanced numbers do really project him to be good. The traditional numbers like him a lot. Averaged 3.5 stocks per game this past year for the UAB Blazers, while also being their primary offensive go-to guy, averaging 18 points, 11 boards a night, 4 assists. Just does a little bit of everything and does it very, very well. So I think playing off of Trae Young, being a defensive contributor, someone who can present a little bit more length, size, and athleticism for Atlanta, especially after turning away DeAndre Hunter, this opens up a lot of minutes and an opportunity here for a guy like Yax to succeed and thrive there in the ATL. Moving to pick number 26, this pick here from the New York Knicks to the Brooklyn Nets. I have them selecting forward Thomas Sorber from Georgetown. This is an upside swing, another guy who has a very unique defensive profile. The player who I keep coming back to as kind of a comparison is a little bit of Rui Hachimura. Now, I think Sorber, and that's more on the offensive end, just looking at where the college shot diet was, the amount of face-up, mid-range jump shots they took. That's the player I continue to think of a bit offensively with him, which I don't love for Brooklyn. Now, I think defensively, Sorber is a more impactful defender, especially coming out of the college game. Sorber had a much better defensive resume than Rui Hachimura did. So I think for Brooklyn, you're really looking at a defensive-minded 4 that can hopefully fit next to Derik Queen and present more length and athleticism and physical tools into your front court long-term. Now, the Nets also do have pick number 27, so they're going to be able to build off of this pick. In this draft so far, we've gone with McNeeley, who's more of an offensive weapon. Now you go with Sorber, who has kind of that two-way functionality moving forward, hopefully, for Brooklyn. Then obviously Derik Queen's kind of that foundational center place piece for them moving forward. But 27th overall, we're going to add a 4th player. Now, I would love for the Nets to package some of these picks, specifically 26 and 27, to move up if there's a guy they really like, either in the early 20s or maybe even the late teens if they can move up that high. But 27th overall, I have them here selecting guard/wing LeBaron Philon, another two-way project player, just like Thomas Sorber. I think for the Nets, we've found some pieces that aren't necessarily like, hey, you have to sit and wait. Like Derik Queen can play day one. Liam McNeeley can play day one, in my opinion. Philon and Sorber, I think, are a little bit more projection project pieces for them, where you're looking at them and saying there's a lot of tools here. There's some moments that we do like from their college film. LeBaron Philon does make plays happen on the defensive end of the floor especially, but he's a very hesitant shooter and at times just quite frankly a non-shooter. I think that's going to be a real concern of mine going into his NBA career is, does this kid actually ever learn to shoot the ball at a reliable clip to be a wing in the NBA? I don't know. But for Brooklyn specifically, like with 4 first-round picks, you're willing to take some stabs on guys who, hey, if they figure out this swing skill, for Philon, it's the three-point shot. For Sorber, it's probably the three-point shot as well, to be honest. So, like Sorber, for example, this year he shot from 3. He shot 16% from 3. And Philon isn't much better on. Philon is better, but not crazy much better. So it's for me, those are the concerns, right? You're not getting guys who shoot the 3-ball super well. You're getting guys who have functional tools in other areas, whether it be defensive playmaking, block percentage, right? There's analytics and advanced numbers that suggest Philon and Sorber can both be really impactful defenders, but the best kind of defenders are the ones who can still play offense, because if you get sagged off of and you hurt your team's offense more than you hurt the other team's offense, you're really not that useful of a team defender. So I think that's what you need to keep in mind here with Brooklyn if they do go Sorber and Philon 26 and 27 respectively. But I still think nonetheless for the Nets here, I can see them going this way. And remember, these mocks are not what I would do. It's what I expect these teams to look at doing. And we talk through all the different possibilities so that when we get to draft night, I've wrapped my mind around every single possible outcome. And, going Sorber Philon here is not out of the realm of possibility at all for the Nets here toward the end of the first round. Pick 28, the Boston Celtics here. And this pick just screams Brad Stevens. I will honestly be really upset on draft night because I am not a Boston Celtics fan. Now, I don't dislike the Boston Celtics. In fact, I do think that it's good when they win because I do think their front office is really smart. And I like seeing teams that I think are doing smart stuff win because it validates what I believe in a lot of ways. And it kind of secures my perspective on stuff. A few years ago, I thought anyone who suggested breaking up Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown was dumb. And they ended up winning a title. I thought the trade for Porzingis was brilliant. I gave it an A++++ on Twitter. You can go and look at those things and look at my analysis on these before they won a championship. And all of their decisions have been brilliant. And this is another example here, 28th overall. They select forward Alex Karaban out of UConn. This, again, I talked about it with the Liam McNeeley pick. You put him into a situation like Boston where the ball flows, the ball movement is spectacular. I don't know why more people don't celebrate the way Boston plays. They have so much talent, but they play such a selfless brand of basketball. It's incredibly refreshing to watch. It's incredibly fun to watch. Alex Karaban fits into this like a glove. He's one of the more connective players in this draft. He knows how to swing, boom pass, cross the perimeter. He generates a lot of three-point looks by being that touch passer, being that extra pass kind of guy, but also has the skill set to make the three-point shots himself, something he's done very, very well for 2 championship teams in college basketball for UConn. And then something else he did, quite well this year as a more primary offensive weapon, which again, I don't think he's going to be in the NBA at all. This is again a low ceiling, very, very, very high floor pick for Boston. And this is one where with all of the new CBA ramifications, finding cheap labor that can contribute and help you win is going to be essential for these high budget teams, these expensive teams. Boston's as expensive as it gets. So finding a player like Alex Karaban here, this is the type of pick that if you're any other GM in the league, you got to be rolling your eyes at because you're like, how the hell did this guy fall to the Boston Celtics? This is a home run pick for Boston here. If you're a Celtics fan, this is like screaming A++++ all over again. I just love this fit for the Celtics a ton. Pick 29, the Phoenix Suns, a team that, oh boy, we're headed towards an interesting era of Phoenix Suns basketball. Devin Booker very well could be staying. Kevin Durant very well likely not. And now the Suns are faced with, do we look to rebuild? Which it doesn't seem like there's any interest from ownership right now to do that at all. So it means, okay, well, what pieces can we find to kind of fluctuate this team, change it up, and still win? I think starting a Kevin Durant trade where you trade him for winning players, whether that be a Dallas Mavericks package, cough, 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 or something else, that's Phoenix's way out of this, is if you can get another team that doesn't know what they're doing to overpay for Kevin Durant, especially a 37-year-old Kevin Durant, and if you can get pieces that fit your team moving forward, and you still have this pick to add to it as well, the Suns can kind of fix some of their problems and improve their team. Now, can they become a championship caliber team again? That's going to be really, really challenging, but they can be a consistent playoff level team with Devin Booker and the right pieces around him. 29th overall, I have the Suns here selecting forward Nick Clifford from Colorado State. Another kind of do it all a little bit for your team type of player. Nick Clifford for the Rams this past year for Colorado State. A huge shot maker, big time shot creator, and I think could provide some of that value here, like late shot clock, broken down possessions for Phoenix. Those are valuable possessions still. Even if things didn't go right, your set didn't create an opportunity to actually score, Nick Clifford might be able to bail you out of some of those possessions, but he also is another guy who has the physical tools, gifts, athletic traits to be a quality NBA player. Now, again, this is another player who I think the ceiling is quite low on. I'm not a huge Nick Clifford guy myself, but I see a team drafting him in the first round. I think Phoenix could be one there where after you trade Kevin Durant, you're looking for more forward wing play. Nick Clifford fits that criteria to begin with, and I think the Suns are going to look to stay a little bit bigger, a little bit more athletic. In some of my mock drafts, I've talked about them drafting a guard, which I still think is a need for them long term. But it's also hard when you have Beal, Booker, Tyus Jones, like Colin Gillespie. Your team's already going to be small, so you might want to try and find more forwards, find more bigs. They might be able to accomplish that with the Kevin Durant trade. We'll see which way they ultimately go, but Nick Clifford's a guy who I think could fit in for this team long term. Pick number 30, the LA Clippers here in their part of the swap with the Thunder will end our first round mock draft here, and I have them selecting guard Walter Clayton Jr. from Florida. What an NCAA tournament run it's been, an Elite 8 dominant, brilliant performance, followed up by an even better one, in my opinion, in the Final Four, where he just honestly carried Florida past the finish line against Auburn. Really, the Gators, who we saw with Alex Condon, went 22nd overall in this mock draft, struggled mightily against John I. Broome, another potential maybe first-round pick in this year's draft, depending on who declares and who doesn't for the NBA class. But Walter Clayton Jr. Has shot the ball really, really well. That's really the skill that you're betting on here. And for the Clippers, a team that really needs another ball handler, another playmaker, decision maker, he doesn't necessarily give you the court mapping, court vision awareness that I would really love for this pick, 30th overall. But what I really wanted to do, end of the first round here, I wanted to show Walter Clayton Jr. some love, especially ahead of the NCAA championship tonight between Florida and Houston. Again, make sure to comment your picks and predictions down below on who wins that national title matchup. I'm extremely excited for it. We'll be seated watching, of course. I hope you guys do enjoy the video here. Again, if you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks again all so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.